Welcome to In the Driver's Seat. I am Lisa French, a former race car driver turned empowerment coach. This podcast is all about exploring the power of mindset, belief, and deliberately creating a life that you truly love. In these first episodes, I'll be sharing some deeply personal chapters from my life journey, stories of resilience, heartbreak, rediscovery, and the lessons I learned along the way. My goal is for you to find a little piece of yourself in my stories and for you to step into your own power. Whether you're here to learn, reflect, or just feel a little less in this world, you are in the right place. I am so happy to have you here as we journey to a life filled with clarity, purpose, and possibility. Let's get started. This episode is going to be a little harder for me to get through. In fact, I had a little bit of tears before I got started, just thinking about missing my mom and dad. So it's about losing both my parents by the age of 35. I had actually lost all my grandparents and both my parents. So I'm going to just talk about what it was like. Each of them were each unique, but each left a big void in my life. So I first lost my dad, and it was a very unique experience in the fact that there was a lot that led up to it. He started with legal troubles in his business in November of 1989. And then for 6 years that drug on, different aspects of that. And there's a whole story, intriguing story to what led up to then in December 1995. That was the last time anybody had heard from him. And my brother had went to where my dad was living and basically said, Lisa, it looks like he went to the store and never came back. Now, both my brother and I have our opinion we both have the same opinion of what happened to him. And if you followed me for a while, you know that I'm writing a book about this whole ordeal. So the reason I'm not going to get into all of it right now is not because I'm writing a book. It's just that there are so many layers to it. And I don't really want this episode to be about that. What I will tell you, something that a lot of people do not know, is that in the process of those layers in the story of what led up to my dad's disappearance, my dad and I became estranged. He had cut off communication from me about a year and a half before he disappeared. And if you knew my dad at all, you know he was stubborn. And I just let him be that. I didn't get upset. I wasn't angry. I didn't hold a grudge against him because he decided to just cut me off, despite the fact I was a daddy's girl in my entire life. I always actually felt that eventually it would come back around. And my son was born in later that year when he had stopped talking to me. And I even would send pictures of my son with my brother, Kenny, to when I knew he was going to visit him. And like, hey, take pictures of Devin to dad. And so I really always held on to that hope of, or really felt that he would come, eventually he would get over it. But then we never got that. We never got that reconciliation. So it's just so weird because I didn't really get a chance to grieve it, or I didn't really have a grieving process, I guess, because I had already had, in a way, like I had lost a relationship with him in a way. So, and also because for years, just his legal troubles that I don't know how to explain it. But I guess that it didn't necessarily surprise me in a way, but it was still shocking, and I don't mean to make it sound like he was this terrible person, because he wasn't. Anyway, it was just I just had to let it go, and I don't know how to explain it other than that I was just, even though I missed him dearly and always hoped that maybe I was wrong about, I thought he was dead, that um I really just felt that I would never see him again, and we haven't. So then, obviously, then I lean a lot more on my mom, which, as I explained in the first episode, love my mom, but we did not live with her. So, uh, this was a really like a blossoming of our relationship in a way, or strengthening of it. Not that it was bad at all, but it was just this other new chapter of our relationship, mother and daughter, because now I have children, or, I was starting my family, and to be able to, lean on her in that aspect and see her as a grandmother. And, um, that was a really fun experience. My mom lived an hour and a half from, or not, a little over an hour from where I lived in Iowa. And I guiltily knew that I did not see her as often as I should. She smoked. My grandmother, her mom, and other family members lived with her, and they all smoked. I was not a smoker, so it was very difficult for me to be around it, especially at that level of, that many people. As well, then also as being a mother, I didn't really want to expose my children to it. So I struggled with that. I struggled with, I want to spend more time with my mom. I want to see her. I want my children to be around her. My children love to go there. And the fall of 2006, my mom had a major stroke, and directly tied to the cigarette smoking. What was really kind of crazy was, maybe within just a couple weeks before that happened, somebody who was a friend at the time. She was very intuitive, and she randomly, none of my friends knew my mom, and she had randomly asked me, "How often do you see your mom?" And I had to say, well, probably not as much as I should. It's just really hard because there's a lot of cigarette smoke. And she didn't explain, but she just said, "You need to go see your mom, or you need to spend more time with her." And then, like, not very long after that, my mom had a major stroke, and she never recovered from that. I mean, she physically she never recovered from it. So that went on for about 6 months, and it was really difficult for me because I had just enrolled in some college classes that were in Des Moines, which was the opposite direction of where my mom lived compared to where I was at. And in order to be successful in my classes, I had to be there. There was no getting around missing class that counted towards your grade. I was so thankful that my brother was able to be there a lot and support her, because I wasn't. Being in college, these classes, it limited my availability to go then to see my mom, as well as, had my children were young and all that. So, and then in the midst of all of it, I was planning a wedding to my second husband. And I remember even asking my mom, "Do you want us to postpone it?" And she did not want me to do that. We had people that were traveling, family was traveling from out of state. And so my mom was not able to make it to the wedding, which was heartbreaking in that fact. But I also knew she didn't want me to not go forward with it. So the positive out of that was that her family, considering that a lot of them came from Illinois, they came to the wedding, and then on the way back to Illinois, they stopped and visited my mom. Went on my honeymoon, came back. The week after we got back from the honeymoon, we went to an event that was about an hour and a half north of us. We did not get very good phone reception. And Sunday, when we were leaving to go back home, we get in our car, our phones start kind of like getting better reception. And my brother's been trying to get a hold of me. You need to get here. Mom's not going to make it. And she was readmitted to the hospital. So now we're frantic. I'm crying. I don't think I'm going to make it in time. Fortunately, I did. Made it and was able to spend quite a bit of time there with my brother before she finally passed. But I just remember immediately feeling like I immediately just felt like I was alone in my own feelings of it. And I wasn't ready to lose her. I was not ready to lose her. Like, she was my foundation. She was everything. She was my number one supporter. She was my person I went to for advice. She was the first person I called with good news. And to not have my dad, not to have her, not to have grandparents, I just, obviously I have my brother, and I have my older half siblings, but they're all over the country, and we weren't super close. So I just, I struggled. I remember that night, I couldn't barely sleep. I felt like, my husband at the time and family members were, like joking around, and they weren't being insensitive. That wasn't it. It just, I'm like, I can't even get on their level. Not even close. So the funeral happened, and thankfully, my husband's family was very supportive. But that I didn't have, they were the only people that were there for me, like just for me. I didn't have any friends that came. I had a couple of friends send a card, and if you're listening, or one of my friends, you're listening, I just went, that was the one thing, was I think, because most of them, well, some are close to my age, but some are younger, and friends were younger, and I don't know how, I just knew, like, there was something that told me they don't understand. Like, it's not because they don't care. They just have never experienced a death at that level. Like, losing a parent is so different than losing your grandparent, which is, losing my grandma French was absolutely devastating to me. But, and obviously other grandparents too, but it's just, it was so different. I just felt so alone in the world. And so I had to, I don't know how I knew it, but I just knew I could have chose to be mad. That's another moment in my life where I could have been really mad. Like, you weren't there for me. I needed you, and you weren't there for me. But somehow I lovingly, like, my heart knew to give them grace, and that it wasn't personal, but they just didn't understand. So as years passed and each one of them lost a parent, and I was there for them, some of them apologized to me. Like, I'm so sorry I didn't understand. I'm so sorry I wasn't there when your mom passed away. And I was like, I know you just don't, you can't understand the perspective until you go through it. The other part that I had to navigate that I didn't expect was not only was I extremely sad, but I also, I, I think out of the sadness, I became a little bit angry because I felt I was upset that she didn't take care of her health. Like, and I had to learn to let that go and to become at peace with it. That, you know, it, she didn't do it on purpose. But what it did give me was now I mean, there's no guarantees in life, but I don't want my children to experience that at 35 years old. Now, granted, my mom was older. My parents were older when they had me and my brother, but I do what I can to take care of my health. Yeah, I'll be 53, and when I'm recording this, actually, by the time you watch this, I will be 53. But I just I do what I can. It just gave me a new perspective on taking care of my health for lots of reasons. What was new for me too was that I felt like I've always been kind of in tune to my emotions, and I let them guide me. So if I'm not my normal happy self, I've always been a very happy person. And so if that's not going on, I try to analyze why and what am I going to do about it. And I was struggling to pick myself up off the floor. All I wanted to do was be in bed. I don't know if I could say I was actually depressed. If I was, there was a clinic, if I would have said I was clinically depressed or on the verge of it, mildly, probably yes. It was hard because I didn't know what to do to turn it around. I would try to be social. I would try to go do stuff with my friends, and I felt like I was faking it. I felt like I was absolutely faking being happy. And all I wanted to do was just go back home and lay down and be by myself. I remember my kids coming and checking on me late. Sometimes I would cry. But then probably the two things that saved me. One, while I was in college classes, my finals were, one of my finals was during when my mom passed away. During that period of time, either went around her funeral or whatever. So I missed my final, which I was doing. It's some of if you're my hospital peeps, you're going to maybe be surprised by this, but the college classes I was taking was for medical transcription. And I missed the transcription test. It was literally the end of my classes that I needed. I just needed to pass, like, can you transcribe? And I missed it. And I had no desire to make it up. I didn't even know if I mentally could do it. So I never finished. And I see this job listing for the local hospital, which was like blocks away from where I lived at the time. It wasn't in medical transcription, but I thought to myself, well, maybe if I do this, I could get my foot in the door and then I could actually learn to finish. Like, I could kind of like baby step my way into medical transcription, I guess. That's what I thought. Little did I know that really medical transcription in a way was on the way out because everything was getting digitalized and or whatever. That whole world was changing. In reality, it was a favor to me to not get into it, and also a blessing to me because I ended up as an administrative assistant and worked my way up to executive assistant, learned so much, grew so much as a person, grew so much professionally. The opportunities and the things I learned, the skills I learned, the people I was with was such a blessing. I loved every part of that. The other part that saved me was around the same time. I remember I opened the front door of our house. It was early spring, and I just wanted to let some fresh air in, some sunshine in. And when I opened the door, I heard these wind chimes across the street. It's this lady's house. I never had heard the wind chimes until that moment. And they sounded just like these wind chimes that my mom had when I was very young, right after my parents had divorced, in this little farmhouse that she rented. They were on her porch. So whenever during the summer or whatever that was nice out, she'd have her front door. Then you could just hear them, and they were just constantly clanking, and they were very annoying, super metal sound. I cannot stand those wind chimes. But I hear these wind chimes, they sound just the same. And I thought it was the most beautiful thing in the world. It brought so much peace to my heart. And I really felt that it was my mom. Because like I said, it was the first time I had ever heard it since we'd lived there. And I really felt it was my mom giving me a sign. So that wind chimes just became kind of a symbol of my mom. One of the most profound signs or messages I received from my mom came actually through my daughter. It was a few months after my mom had passed. We were at a cabin that belonged to an aunt and uncle. We went there for the weekend because one of my mom's wishes were to have her ashes spread in water. The reason why was because she never learned to swim. So she wanted her ashes to go in water. And each one of her children, 6 of us, all received our own portion of ashes to do with it what we wanted. This is what I wanted to do. It was in the Mississippi River because it went between both Iowa and Illinois, which were 2 states she had lived in. And after we did that, we were out in the boat, and we did each one of us, my children took a turn putting the ashes in the water. And we were back at the cabin sitting around a fire, and everybody was kind of just chattering, talking and whatever. And my daughter, she was 10 at the time, she's out of the blue just says, Grandma French said that was really nice what you did for her today. And I remember thinking, I don't know if I heard her correctly. So he said, what? She said, so she repeated it. Grandma French said that was really nice what you did for her today. When it comes from such an innocent child who would not, there's no way she could make that up. No, I already believed in that sort of thing anyway, but again, just such profound peace at that moment to know that my mom was there with us. She saw it. It was just a very loving feeling. And another kind of really fun sign, my mom's cousin, one of her cousins who had found me on Facebook, a lot of my mom's family was from Tennessee. And before I was getting ready for work this one particular morning, I had saw her cousin had posted this thing on Facebook that says something about cardinals being symbols of people from heaven, or, again, a sign from heaven, somebody from heaven. And I have no idea why this thought came to me in that moment. But when I saw that, I immediately had this thought of, if my mom was going to send me a sign, it wouldn't be a cardinal. It would be a blue jay. There is no correlation that I can think of between my mom and a blue jay. So why that came to mind, I have no idea. I remember even thinking, I don't know why. I don't know why she would send me a blue jay. There was even a cardinal family that had a little nest outside the kitchen window at the house I lived in at the time. go to work, come home, entering the front door when I get home from work, and I hear this absolutely very shrill sound from a big pine tree that was in the front yard. And I thought, what is that noise? And I turned around and looked up, and out of the pine tree flew a blue jay into the tree next to it on a limb next to a cardinal. I just kind of laughed and I thought, blue jay, mom, cardinal, my dad. Then somebody had told me when I shared that story, said, yeah, and blue jays and cardinals hate each other. And I'm like, well, that was probably a perfect sign of my mom and dad. And probably why the blue jay was like squealing or squawking, shrilling, whatever it was doing. Absolutely perfect symbols of my parents and then to land next to it. I lost my dad in 95, but he started sending me signs when I made the decision to move to Florida, which was many years after my mom had passed. But I started getting signs from my dad because a lot of the reason why I wanted to move was I wanted to put myself into a position of having more freedom and time to be able to focus on writing a book about my dad's disappearance. So it had a lot to do with him, not that Florida had anything to do with him or the reason why I was moving to Florida. But I started finding dimes everywhere. I say that pennies are from heaven, and I felt like, I don't know why, like when it would find these dimes, it was always kind of in a moment where I needed some guidance or assurance or whatever. And my dad he had a lot of coin collection. And in particular, when I was really young, I remember he had a lot of dimes in these little cardboard things, I don't know, holders. They were stapled together. And they had a little cellophane middle where the dime was. And that's what I remember distinctly from his coin collection. Even though he had lots of other coins, I remember these dimes. And then I always kind of laughed because I thought, well, yeah, if my dad's going to send me a symbol, a sign from him as a coin, it is not going to be a penny. There's no way my dad's sending me a stinking little penny. So what's kind of ironic is that, as I said, like, I knew that getting through this episode was going to be a little difficult for me. I was out in the parking lot coming into the apartment, and I found the dime in the parking lot. They'll be in the most random places. It's not like, oh, it was on the sidewalk and it fell out of their pocket. It was in the parking lot. Like, I find them in roadways. I find them on the way when I moved here, I found one in the RV that I had just bought. The RV was immaculate. It was older, but it was immaculate, and it was on the counter. Like, it was just so, like, anyway. My point is that the grieving process is hard, and losing people that you love is hard. But if you're open to the signs, you will get them. And I think that brings me peace in knowing that my parents are always with me, and they're always giving me these little winks or nods or hellos. When they come, it always makes me smile. Now it's easier to not be the sad times come less, I guess. Probably one of the biggest things that came from losing my parents was a change in my perspective of how I'm going to live my life. You hear the saying, life is short, but I don't feel people necessarily always live that life is short. They say it, but they don't necessarily live it. I felt like I felt it myself, like my life was just on repeat. The same thing, like the same things were happening month after month at work. I wasn't experiencing very many new things in my own personal life, but I did take steps in what I could, as far as, used to be from spring to fall, every single Saturday, I was at Knoxville Raceway watching the races, which I loved. And I loved spending time with my friends there. But I kept thinking, what other things am I missing out on? So I would go to an Iowa Cubs game, or I would go to a music event in Des Moines, or the arts festival, whatever. There were just other things I was going to go to my hometown for a visit. I made it more of a priority to try to do things with my kids, like take them on vacations and or little weekend getaways, whatever I could afford for that most part. But I remember feeling like I missed out on a lot of that as a kid because we were always racing, and we didn't go on vacation. Our vacations were going on a race trip to the racetrack. Again, no regrets. I loved my childhood, but again, it's just, what am I missing in life? Where slowly, bit by bit, I transitioned from this deep sadness into peace and connecting to a different part of my life. It's also gained me deeper empathy for those who have also lost people close to them. I try to do my best to show that I'm there for them and I understand their grief. So in closing, I just want to say, if you have a similar experience, or you have signs that you've received from loved ones, I love to hear the stories. I think it's really helpful and healing to hear other people's experiences. And if you have enjoyed this episode and would like to stay in touch to hear more of my episodes, please subscribe or follow wherever you're listening or watching this. You can find me on social media. I have a Facebook page, Lisa French Empowerment Coach, and I'm also on Instagram. I love to hear from you. And until the next time, know that you are always loved.